Anyway, I'm going to move on to the latter part of Christopher Nolan's career. When I started university, I'm 25 now, but this was back when I was about 19. I became friends with a gentleman by the name of David Camp, who was also as enthusiastic about film as I am. After having a few drinks with him, we went back to his halls of residence, and whilst I was chatting to a few of his friends, he actually gave me a copy of the screenplay for this. It was the original version done by the original first draft done by David Goyer. Now, I don't generally rate Goyer that highly as a writer, and especially as a director, because Blade Trinity was just terrible. It took everything right back down to the bare bones of what Batman was. Once it came out, I had a few drinks with David and a couple of his flatmates. We went down and watched Batman Begins and were just absolutely blown away. And we even went with a gentleman who was sceptical about comic book movies as a whole. He's never been interested in the likes of Batman and Superman, but to be fair, I've never been that interested in Superman either. He came out of it and he was just blown away as well. He just said, I mean, when I asked him what he thought about it, he just said the movie speaks for itself, which is everything that you need to know about Batman Begins. It was the first one that seemed to get it right. Bit of a side note, I don't mind Batman and Robin quite as much as some people. It's not a very good film, but I don't think it's the worst movie in history. The worst movie in history ever made is Alien vs Predator Requiem, hands down. Just watch friggin' Troll 2, and that's a worse movie. Even the Tim Burton ones. Now, getting controversial here, I don't rate Tim Burton hugely either. I don't think he's an amazing director. I mean, he's very visual, but that's about it. And I never thought his Batman movies were that great either. The dark, nasty aesthetic that was brought up in stuff like Batman Year One, Batman The Dark Knight Returns, Batman The Long Halloween, Batman The Killing Joke, there's really kind of where you realise that Batman is a tortured soul. Now, that's just perfect territory for someone who delves into the psychology of his characters so much as Christopher Nolan. It was the first in what has now become a very lucrative business in rebooting franchises. Origin stories are always really difficult as well. I mean, if you look at Iron Man, it's quite an entertaining film, but it's not great. It doesn't elevate itself to the likes of Spider-Man 1 and 2 or Hellboy 2. X-Men is also another difficult one where the first one is scuppered by the fact that it has to introduce all these characters. I really like Spider-Man, but even so, that was, bested by its sequel. Setting up a known universe is always more difficult than getting the second one done, because the second one has always got the established canon to work as a base, as a jumping off point. What do we know about Batman? We know that he comes from a very wealthy family. We know that he's been psychologically scarred by the fact that his parents were killed in front of him, and it uses that as the jumping off point to delve into why a man would go around dressed as a bat fighting crime. And the genius of Batman Begins is it makes it believable. Gotham is such a shithole in this film as well. I mean, Gotham is just awful. It's more of a comic book movie than The Dark Knight is, as Nolan has become known for. It is a thinking man's blockbuster. It does sacrifice some of its integrity in terms of the last half hour is just lots of crash bang wallop, things blowing up, car chases, Batman running around beating people with his fists. You can't have a Batman movie without him going crash bang wallop. Christian Bale as Batman is amazing. I mean, he is really good. I with both Begins and The Dark Knight, I have problems with his Batman voice. It drives me bonkers. It's the first Batman movie that really got the psychology of the character down to a T. It's just the believability it instills in it. It's only after you come out of the cinema that you realise that you've actually watched a movie about a guy dressing as a bat, fighting crime. I mean, that in itself is ludicrous. I think The Dark Knight is better. I'll get onto The Dark Knight in a minute. I think The Dark Knight is a better film. Although The Dark Knight is more epic, I think Batman is more contained. I think it has a more contained storyline. Considering Nolan has never directed action before this, and this is his first movie in which he's ever had to divulge in action, and it is a bit cat-handed at times. I mean, the editing is a bit kind of all over the place, and you kind of feel like he might be going Michael Bay on us. He spent so much time setting up that world in such a believable fashion that when the crash bang wallet comes at the end, you can just satisfyingly sit back and enjoy the spectacle on the screen. Without a doubt, is one of the best superhero movies. In fact, it was the best superhero movie up until the release of its sequel, which is an even better superhero movie. It's flat out 5 out of 5. Cannot give it any less of a score. Interestingly enough, after doing something as big as that, Christopher Nolan then went on and did this. Kind of jokingly say, it's Batman versus Wolverine. Basic premise: it's set in the turn of the century in London, and the Universal backlot makes a very convincing London, I have to say. Two rival magicians, one American, one British. Christian Bale plays Alfred Borden. Hugh Jackman plays an American called Robert Angier. They are colleagues, although they're kind of they're very at odds with each other in terms of the different ways they do magic. Something significant happens whilst they're on stage. It turns into a rivalry, and the rivalry effectively becomes deadly. Outside of his comic book works, this is the most far-fetched of Christopher Nolan's movies. It is also the least widely lauded of his films. It's the only one on Rotten Tomatoes that has less than an 80% approval rating. I think it's got like a 75, 76 approval rating. It's better than Insomnia, but it's not as good as Memento, Batman Begins, and The Dark Knight. Neither of the characters are actually particularly nice. I mean, they both have their problems. It's only once the main plot twist at the end of the story happens that you realise just how far both of them have gone. Although Angier, Jackman's character, goes much further, goes much more into in terms of just playing dirty, in terms of trying to ruin Christian Bale's character. Christian Bale is no shining light himself. I mean, basically his dedication to his art costs him his wife. Costs him his career, it costs him his lover. I mean, it costs him everything. It's one of these things where you have to suspend belief a bit, because you kind of have to sit there and wonder, if everything is collapsing around him, would he still consider, being so dedicated to his art? The mood, it says, despite its far-fetched nature, and it does get far-fetched. I mean, David Bowie is in this as Nikolai Tesla. The whole subplot with Angier travelling to Colorado to get this big machine, to have Tesla build this machine for his magic trick, borders on the science fiction. Again, you're so invested in the storyline that once these big twists and turns start happening and everything just kind of goes a bit WTF, that you're willing to accept how ludicrous the plot line gets to. It's only just in terms of how far-fetched it is that lets it down. Every player in it is very good. I mean, I would love to see Christopher Nolan working with Michael Caine until the end of time. I think some of Michael Caine's best work has been with Christopher Nolan. Christian Bale also, he's a good actor, but I mean, if he's in the hands of a good director, that is. He's very good in American Psycho, primarily because he's supposed to be just that obnoxious, horrible, consumerist person that he's supposed to be. But you watch him in something like Terminator Salvation, which in itself isn't a terrible film. It's not very good, but it's not terrible. He is terrible in it. I mean, he is bloody awful. He goes around speaking like this the entire time, doing this really awful Batman voice. I've always rated Hugh Jackman. Considering that the role of Wolverine was going to go to Dougray Scott, who I think is one of the worst actors working today, you can't imagine it being anyone else other than Hugh Jackman. He's like Johnny Depp in that sense, in that they've both done very bad movies in the past. They're generally the best thing in the bad movies. I mean, I think it's one of the finest performances Hugh Jackman's ever done, actually, because he effectively plays two people. He plays Angier, and he also plays the double for the trick. He's just able to embody both these characters so well. The only weak link in the whole of The Prestige, apart from just how absurd it gets towards the last act, the payoff in the last act is perfectly satisfactory. It is just its ludicrous nature. But the only other one really bad link in it is Scarlett Johansson. Well, she's attractive, let's be honest. I mean, she's a very, very good-looking woman, and she spends most of her time in a corset, which is great. She's just not very good. Her British accent isn't very good either. I mean, get someone who can at least do a decent British accent. It kind of takes you a bit out of every scene that she's in because it's not that good. I mean, look at Hugh Jackman. I mean, he's an Australian, and his American accent is amazing. The Prestige, I'm going to give 4.5 out of 5. I think it's very, very good. I mean, it's worth seeking out. It creates a mood like I don't think I've seen in any of Chris Nolan's works before or since. Maybe The Dark Knight.